My name is Irfan Hoseiny. I'm an Iranian journalist living in Dubai, the UAE, and I cover Asian football for the Asian Football Show and Iranian football for Golbazan podcast. So if you're into any of those, you feel free to check us out.
Cool. So, how's this World Cup being anticipated by Iranian football supporters chiefly?
Um, obviously due to the circumstances, it's not as hyped up as previous World Cups, and it's difficult to say. It's difficult to get any contact with inside of Iran right now because of the internet blackout. Um, at the end, football is always a way for Iranians to come together and support the national team. Of course, this time it's going to be less, like I said, because of the situation. But we're still expecting a good amount of hype. I mean, the national team has been struggling recently, and the support has been at a low, a very at a low, especially over the last 2 to 3 years. With head coach Amir Al, a lot of supporters don't really like him. So I'll be honest with you, it's not very anticipated.
Is does that translate to both fans and the media? So, I'm tending to find fans anticipatory, media quite pessimistic. I would imagine that more or less translates in Iran. Yes.
I would argue both are actually pessimistic. You know, for the media and there's been a lot of criticism for the federation actually, because they haven't been able to organize any proper friendly matches ahead of the World Cup. I mean, yeah, we're going to play against Gambia and Puerto Rico before the World Cup behind closed doors, but that's, with all due respect to them, that's not the level of friendlies you want to be playing before going up against the likes of Mohamed Salah or Kevin De Bruyne or Chris Wood. So it's been a disappointing preparation campaign.
What would you say overall is the condition of Iranian football, both domestically and the ability to export players? Would you say it's in a healthy place or a not so healthy place?
Compared to the previous World Cups, it's worse. Obviously, the domestic situation. I would argue the domestic league is better than it was a few years ago. We've gotten a lot of quality foreign players playing in the Iranian league. Uh, but on the exports, unfortunately, a lot of players have been coming back to Iran and the region rather than going to Europe, which is what we would prefer, of course. But I think that again, it just shows like the level of the league is also improving, and the pay is much higher than it was a few years ago, and that's why you see a lot of the national team players coming back to Iran. But on the export, yeah, that's actually a big problem because. Uh, I would say the mindset of Iranian players has changed a lot compared to what it was in 2018 or 2022, where most of our team were playing in Europe, whereas nowadays it's mostly a domestic team.
So, where does Iranian football talent come from? Like, how are footballers developed in the country? Is it coming from cities? Is it coming from rural areas? Does it come from all over? Like, where do the players come from and how?
Actually, most of Iranian players come from rural backgrounds and poor families. You know, let's take Mehdi Taremi as an example. He's probably the most known Iranian player who plays in Greece at Olympiacos. He's from a fairly big city called Bushehr, but his family there was quite poor. But he played football from a young age, got scouted by his local club, then obviously made the ranks up. But yeah, the facilities aren't there really. There's maybe two decent academies in Sepahan and Fulad, but it's mostly just teams going, local teams scouting at their own cities and then making their way up from there.
Cool. So let's talk about qualification. How easy or not easy was Asian qualifying for around this go around?
Qualification was very easy this time for Iran, especially, considering the expansion to 48 teams. And of course, we got a very easy group, let's be honest. I mean, if we were in, let's say, the group with Australia and Saudi Arabia, I feel like we would have struggled. I'm not saying we would not have qualified, but we would have struggled a lot more. Um, But here, Iran has been acing qualification campaigns since 2018, and it was much easier for them this time around. And yeah, the tactics were questionable, but what's important in qualifiers is you win the games, and Iran won almost all of the games, so it was easy for them.
What is the you mentioned the preparation. I think I'd be amiss not to ask about that one. So, what has the federation been trying to do in the between period? I know that you played some games in Turkey and all of that, but like how smooth or rough has the preparation been considering everything?
Well, I'll start after the World Cup. So after the World Cup, we had the uh, CAF Nations Cup, uh, which is a tournament held every uh, 3 or 4 years, I believe it is, with the Central Asian countries. So that's Iran, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Afghanistan, and etc. Um, the only decent game that came out of that tournament was against Uzbekistan, which was the final, obviously. The other games were against, I believe it was India, Afghanistan, and Tajikistan. Um, and yeah, the only decent game was against Uzbekistan. And there were a lot of questionable refereeing decisions in that game, but at the end, Uzbekistan still won. And then next month, we played in an international tournament here in the UAE, where we played a game against Cape Verde and then against Uzbekistan again. Oh God, we've played them like 5 times in the last year. We're getting very tired. Um, we won against Cape Verde on penalties, and then lost to Uzbekistan on penalties. So, and then after that, we had the March camp, as you mentioned, in Turkey, where we played against Nigeria, where we lost 2-1, and Costa Rica, where we won 5-0. So better opponents there, but still not the standard that you want to be playing against before a World Cup. In comparison, back in 2022, we played against Senegal and Uruguay before the World Cup, which are much better opponents.
So let's talk about the coach. Who is he, and what's the style of play? And you've already mentioned there's a bit of question marks surrounding him.
Yeah, so Amir has been the head coach since after the World Cup in 2022. So he took over in early 2023 after Carlos Queiroz left, and he's a very successful coach domestically. He's the most successful coach domestically. Actually, he's won 5 league titles and 3 cups. Um, but he's actually managed the Iranian national team as well back in 2007. It was so. This is his second stint, and with Amir Ghalenoui, when he was playing domestically, he tends to be more of a coach who focuses on throw-ins and set pieces rather than tactical plays. That's why a lot of people were worried when he came into a national team, but he was getting the results. Even at the 2023 Asian Cup, we beat Japan, who were the favorites, and got to the semifinals. So he did have the support, but then after the Asian Cup, where he promised, okay, he promised that we're gonna make this team younger. We're gonna, bring in players from the under 23s, the under 20s. That barely happened. That almost didn't happen. Maybe he brought in 2 or 3 new players, and that's it. And a lot of the guys who we expect to be retired from the national team by now are still playing, and that's where a lot of the criticism comes from. And the tactics as well feel like he hasn't updated his tactics. He still uh, plays like he coaches a national team like he coaches a domestic club. That's the best way I can put it for you. And it's very, very different. And I think he relies a lot on the individual quality of our forwards, especially Sardar Azmoun and Taremi, um, and Mohammad Mohibi recently as well.
So let's get into some of the star names. You've mentioned Taremi. There's Yahan Bash, who maybe people are aware of. What form are the top guys in? And then maybe who are some guys that maybe people don't know about? Maybe they're playing in the domestic league that you're like, this guy might have a good World Cup if it all goes well.
Our most informed player was actually Ali Golizade, who plays in Lech Poznan in the Polish league. Just won the league title with them as well, the second in a row. Unfortunately, he got an ACL injury just around 10 days ago, I believe it was, which is very unfortunate because we were counting on him a lot. He was fantastic. He's such a technical player, just cuts outside the box, shoots, very comfortable on the ball, and he played back in 2022 as well. He got the assist for Taremi as first goal against England. He's a fantastic player, and it's very unfortunate because we were looking forward to seeing him play at the World Cup. And then another name that maybe some people are unaware of is Alahir Sayed Manish. He's a player who plays in Westerlo in the Belgian league, formerly of Hull City actually, and also Fenerbahce. Um, he's been also amazing. He's one of the younger players as well. I believe he's 24 or 25. He hasn't had much success with the national team, but he's been on great form with his club, and I think he should be starting at the World Cup. And then of course there's the more established players like Azmoun, Taremi, and Jahan Bakhsh. Jahan Bakhsh plays at the Belgian league as well, but his form isn't the best. His team is bottom of the table. Sadar Azmoun as well, he's been kind of lacking in the UAE, which again, I mentioned this before, a lot of the national team players are moving back into the region and they're getting very comfortable here. And yeah, don't get me wrong, he has been performing with the national team. He has been scoring the goals. But we expect a player of his caliber to still be playing in Europe at this age. With Taremi, he he's the how can I say that he's the one everyone counts on. Even if he's not on his best form, he's still the player everyone expects to score or show up. And recently he became the second all-time scorer of our national team after the legendary Ali Daya, of course. So hopefully he can add on to his tally at the World Cup. He is our highest World Cup goal scorer as well with 2 goals and 1 assist also actually. So a lot of weight on his shoulders, and we expect him to show up. There was one more player. Oh yeah, Mohebi. I wanted to mention. He plays for Rostov in the Russian league. He's kind of Galeno's boy. He's the player that I would say transformed a lot and improved a lot under Amir Galenoy. Back at the Asian Cup, he was criticized a lot, but he kept getting the starts, and then he got that goal against Japan, and then he kind of just he fits right into the team. He's a very good shooter. He can shoot well, and he's pacey as well. So yeah, and maybe some players from the domestic league. A player that everyone has been talking about is Amir Mohammad Razzaqinia. He's a 19-year-old midfielder who plays in Esteghlal, and he's, I believe, the youngest player in the squad or in the preliminary squad right now, and he's played a few games already for the national team, and he's been fantastic. So yeah, that's a name where I would say you should keep an eye out for.
When I was looking at the team, I was surprised how many players played domestically. So I was one of the questions I formed from that was what are the pluses and minuses of having so many home based players under normal circumstances, and what have recent kind of what have the recent challenges been for those players since the conflict started with the United States and Israel?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the league has been on pause, of course, since February, and that affects the match fitness a lot of these players. I mean, we've seen it in Tractor. Tractor were the league champions last season, and they had an AFC Champions League round of 16 match against Shabab Al Ahly from Dubai. And even though they were absolutely fantastic in the first stages of the league, they were, I believe, third in the overall league stage. But in the round of 16, you could clearly see that they weren't match fit. They hadn't trained in over 50 days, and it was a mess. And because of that, they made mistakes. They lost 3-0. So since then, though, the players have been holding a domestic camp. There's a list of, I believe, 30 or 32 players who've been together and training together. And they've even held 3 matches against each other, which have been shown on TV as well in Iran, where the team was kind of split into a Team A and Team B, and they played against each other to help the manager cut some players from the squad. Um, but yeah, it's been difficult for the players because obviously, putting the situation aside, uh, they're not match ready, and it's a World Cup year, so they have literally everything to lose. And yeah, and the reason why a lot of players came back to Iran, like I told you, was the quality of the league is improving, and the pay as well. It's increased a lot compared to what it was a few years ago.
So let's talk floor. Let's talk ceiling. In the let's give it the most ideal of circumstances. How bad can it be, and how good can it be? And I'll tag on what pressure is there to succeed. However success is defined, rather.
But first of all, I'll mention that this is the last World Cup for Iran's golden generation, as they said, with it being the last World Cup for Taremi and Jahanbakhsh, and possibly Azmoun as well. Um, the floor and ceiling, I mean, it can go south, bro. It can be as bad as getting 1 point, just a draw against New Zealand, and then losing to Egypt and Belgium. But it can also be maybe 6 points as well. So I would probably say that the floor is 1 point and the ceiling is 6 points. But I don't see us beating Belgium at all. I don't see us getting a point against them.
So would you say like round of 16, quarterfinal? Would that be like the hope of all hopes, or just getting out of the group? Just don't embarrass yourself. Like what's success, bro?
Success would 100% be round of 16. You know, we've never gotten out of the group stages before,
Okay.
um, even though we've participated in 6 editions. So yeah, this time there has been the expansion, and it's much easier to get to the knockout stages. So we don't want to just use the easy way and say, oh, we made it out of the group stages. No, we want to stick with the same goal as we had before and get to the round of 16. And considering the draw, you know, if we finish second, we're gonna play the second place team from Group D, which is either an Australia, a US, a Turkey, or a Paraguay. Which, you know, with all due respect to them, I think it's very possible. So.
Cool. All right. So, what do you think going to the World Cup and representing your nation can do for the confidence and belief of the nation? Or do questions like that maybe put too much pressure on the national team to be something more than what footballers should be? If that question makes sense.
I can't speak for my compatriots back home, to be honest. I'll try my best, but it's difficult because everyone has a different opinion. A lot of the people don't even support this team. A lot of the people support it. So I'll just say my opinion on this matter. I think the players are under so much pressure that you can't even imagine. You know, there's the pressure from the media. There's the pressure, and Iranian media is absolutely crazy, by the way. They'll bash you for anything. There's the pressure from the fans, and even the fans. It's, you know, it's the fans back home, and then there's the diaspora as well. It's the you know, government officials, the federation, everything. The amount of pressure on them, I can't even speak about. So I don't know what I can say. I don't know what's the best way to answer that question. To be honest, it's just bad for them, you know.
I think that's the best
Yeah,
answer possible.
That's the best thing I can say.
So I have two more questions. Who do you think is going to win the World Cup?
Oh, um,
You
yeah.
can give me
When
like
people
one or
ask
two
me this,
favorites. You can
yeah,
give me a few
when people
favorites.
ask me this, I always say either Spain or France, because I just don't think. I think Argentina are a fantastic side, but I think it's very difficult to go back to back at the World Cup. Um, so yeah, I would say either Spain or France will win the World Cup,
All
but you
right.
never know.
Say again.
You never know. You never know.
True. Last question. Is there anything I haven't asked about Iran, Iranian football culture, the national team that you find particularly fun or interesting or novel that you think people should know or might want to know?
Um, yeah, actually, there is something I want to mention. It's about how diverse Iran is as a country. You know, a lot of people, when they think of Iran, they think of Persians and Persians only, but Persians make up maybe only 65% of the country. You know, we've got Turks, we've got Kurdish people, we've got Baluchis, we've got Arabs, and I think that's something that makes us all very proud. that we're all able to come together and represent Iran, and that's sort of what the national team is for as well. We've had players from all different ethnicities representing our country, and I think that's something that we're very proud of. Um, as well as even in the domestic league, you've got teams from different cities that speak different languages, and it's just beautiful how we all come together and play football, and that's all football is about.
That's my kind of answer. Erfan, I thank you for doing this. Where can people find you?
I'm mostly active on Twitter, so that's at ERI1806 on Twitter. Feel free to follow me if you're interested in anything related to Iranian football or Asian football.
Cool. The links will be in the description. I thank you for taking the time to do this, man.
No worries. Thank you for having me.
It's Michael Burgess here I'm the football writer at the New Zealand Herald newspaper, also part of the Football Fever podcast, and been covering the beautiful game in New Zealand for almost 20 years.
Cool. So let's start here. How's the World Cup being anticipated by New Zealand fans?
We can't wait. I mean, it's been a long time. As a lot of people know, New Zealand, this is only the third time New Zealand's been to the World Cup after 1982 and 2010. And it's been 16 years of hurt. It's been a long time trying to get back to a World Cup. This has come at a perfect time because this is also our most talented team, our most talented generation we've ever had. So a lot of excitement and also a bit of uncertainty.
So how's it? Because I'm tending to find that the fans super happy, super, as you say, anticipating it with great joy. But then whenever I talk to journalists, there's like this cloud of pessimism, and I don't know if the team's ready yet. There's a bunch of that. So how is this being covered by New Zealand media? Let's say.
Yeah, good point. It's kind of, there is that uncertainty, that big question around the team. I think especially New Zealand rather than some of the other teams you've talked to because of our qualification route. So we didn't have a tough qualification route at all through Oceania. So the team hasn't been tested. We'll probably get into this later, but over the last 4 years, this cycle, I think they've played something like 27 friendlies, and only 5. I hate the term friendlies, but only 5 competitive games. So the World Cup will be a whole new cauldron, a whole new battle compared to teams from South America, Europe, everywhere else that play those matches and qualify. That's probably the uncertainty you're talking about with journalists. And then, of course, the other thing is this whole World Cup is just such a big new adventure, 48 teams. It's massively spread out. There's a few geopolitical things going on as well. So, there's a lot to think about with this World Cup.
So for those of us who have never been to New Zealand, I don't know if I'd ever go just based on flight times and all that kind of stuff. Like, what is what is New Zealand's footballing culture like for those of us that haven't been?
It's a pretty strong footballing culture. It's always been a sport for a long time that was on the margins, I guess, but participation has always been massive. Now it is actually a lot of people will be surprised. Football is the number one participation sport in New Zealand. So there's more people playing football than there are playing cricket or playing rugby, especially. So, and I think in the last 10 years, football has really grown in this country, partly because of things like the exploits of Chris Wood in the Premier League, that people, just the average sports fans, like, wow, you got this Kiwi scoring goals in the Premier League. And then, of course, we've recently had a second professional team into the Australian A-League. So now I've got 2 professional teams, Wellington and Auckland. That's been a big boost, I think, for the sport. And the other thing I would point to is hosting the Women's World Cup in 2023 really helped the sport take off because it drew in a lot of new fans.
Cool. So if in that hierarchy of stereotypically New Zealand, the all black, the rugby team and all that. So like where does football rank professionally in people's kind of esteem?
Yeah, good question. I mean, rugby's number 1 and number 2 probably. Then you've got cricket is massive. You've got another sport called rugby league, which is similar to rugby but slightly different. And I'd put football at number 4. As I say, massive participation wise, but in terms of if you're talking about the commercial side of things, sponsorship, TV audiences, it's probably number 4. but it's definitely growing, and the World Cup's going to be massive. The World Cup is going to actually stop the nation, partly because it's so unique, partly because we haven't been there for 16 years.
So this is something that happens in the United States, in Canada, and in other countries too, like that just have kind of sports above football. There's this like, well, if only our best athletes played, and however you define athlete, if only our best played football, then we do better. Does that discourse take place in New Zealand? Like, is rugby and the other two, are they getting the best athletes in New Zealand? And if they didn't, would football perhaps be in a different place?
Yeah, I think that used to be a discourse. I think it did, because you get some great athletes playing rugby, not the big forwards, of course, but the lighter guys, the backs, and some actually a lot of guys that played both. They played cricket and football. They played a bit, but cricket was so much bigger. Rugby was so much bigger. Certainly when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s. Now it's different. Now football's cool. Football is cool in the playground. There's a whole lot of kids wearing Premier League shirts, wearing Argentina shirts, let alone Auckland FC and Wellington. So many people playing football, and now there's so many pathways. You can end up playing football professionally in the States, of course, and the college system in Europe, in Asia. So I think that's less of a discourse than it used to be.
So what's the overall condition? I'm asking people to basically be doctors and kind of diagnose for me the state of your country's football. Is it a healthy place or in a not so healthy place?
The overall game, I think it's in a healthy place, but can do better. I think the top tier is great. The national teams are good. We've got 2 professional teams, but below that, the club level stuff, there needs some. I won't go into all the details, but we've currently got a sort of domestic league that encompasses 3 regions and 32 teams, and it's just the quality's been so diluted. So that's one thing to work on. But overall, football's never been a better place because people want to play it and people are watching it.
Cool. So let's talk about qualification. As you said, you played how many? 5 games?
Yeah, and that's going to surprise a few people. It was a very generous route after having. But I sort of say, well, wait a minute. We had these crazy situations in 2013, we had to play Mexico to get to a World Cup. I mean, come on. 2017, we had to go to Lima and play Peru. What are we doing playing Peru? And that was never going to happen. And in 2022, we had to play Costa Rica in Doha. So we've had some really incredibly tough challenges. This one, of course, we just had to play the Oceania teams. There were 3 group games, a semi-final and a final. And not just that, but the semi-final and the final were both in New Zealand. So, it was pretty comfortable. The final was nervy against New Caledonia. It took a while to break through. They're a good team with a lot of players from the French second tier, third tier. But of course, New Zealand were massive favourites. So yeah, it was really comfortable. There was always the expectation they would qualify, and I'm sure there's other teams around the world looking at New Zealand with a bit of jealousy because of that.
This is no question that was on my list, but now I'm trying to formulate it as best I can, which is, so there's this idea that the World Cup should be hosted by different federations almost iteratively. So it'll be hosted by Africa, then it'll go to Europe, South America, Asia, North America. In my mind, at least, because I haven't really had to think about this, New Zealand is in Oceania. It's in a different thing. So naturally, should a World Cup be hosted in New Zealand at some point? Or does maybe because it's proximity to Australia and Australia being in Asia, it kind of takes over that way?
I think it was always a dream, but it felt like an impossible dream to get a World Cup down here. And then we had the Women's World Cup shared with Australia. I think the exciting thing for people in this part of the world is that FIFA are now open to World Cups being shared by countries. They kind of have to be because they made it such a bloody massive extravaganza. And they're also open to cross confederation, which we're going to see next time. And we saw, so I can see it happening, hopefully, where we get, say, Australia, New Zealand, and then there's been talk about Indonesia having some a group in Indonesia, a group in Singapore, maybe a couple of games in the islands. I'm talking about maybe a game in Fiji and a game in in New Caledonia. But I think it'd be wonderful, and I'm sure all the fans and journalists would love coming down to Australia and New Zealand to cover a World Cup.
For sure. All right, so let's get into maybe more of the squad details. So who's the manager, style of play, and are fans pleased with him?
Manager's a guy called Darren Bazley. He's from England. People who follow English football would know him from, he was at Watford for about a decade through the 90s. Watford for a long time in the Championship, almost made the Premier League. I think he left that season. That they went up, but he decided to leave, went to Wolves. So he's got big background in English football. And then he came to New Zealand towards the end of his career to play for a team called the New Zealand Knights. Unfortunately, that team only lasted 2 seasons, and then it just went bankrupt. It was crazy and sad story. They were they'd be at the airport going to away games in Australia. Literally, the team manager would be writing checks to pay for the plane flight. That's how sort of, okay, you can get on the plane now, pay for the flight. So it was just nuts. That team went bust, but Darren didn't go home despite that pretty traumatic experience. He stayed. He's been here ever since. He's been here 20 years. He's basically a Kiwi now. And he was a surprise choice as manager, I have to say. They were chasing some other guys. They were chasing, for example, John Herdman, who was the Canadian, did very well as the Canadian women's coach, then the Canadian men's coach, chasing some other candidates. But he was sort of the guy that had been in the background. To briefly talk about his career, he's basically been in charge of national age group teams for a long time, assistants as well to national coaches. And he's done well. I think the big question over Darren will be his lack of head coach experience. So he's never really been a head coach at a club, which would surprise some people. He's mainly been an assistant. But so far, I think people are on the fence about him, but he has, they like the style of play the team is playing. And he's a guy that people can relate to. He's got a lot of passion and he wants to be in New Zealand. Like in the past, there's been coaches who've just used New Zealand as a bit of a stepladder because they know, come here, might get to qualify for World Cup and then I can go into something else. Whereas he's definitely here. He's committed here. And his big test is coming. His big test is coming, of course, in June.
So of the players, I would say, you've mentioned it before, Chris Wood is perhaps the best known player. Not even perhaps, is the best known player. What moment do you think he's in to perform well?
Unfortunately, not a great moment. It's something that's giving us all nightmares over here. He's coming off his best season in the Premier League last season. He got to 20 goals playing for Nottingham Forest, as I'm sure most people watching this would know. He had an amazing, I think only 3 or 4 players scored more goals than him in the league. You're talking about Haaland, Mo Salah. It was just incredible. He was at the peak of his powers. Since then, he's had this horrible run with injuries. He's barely played for Forest this season. So we're hoping he's back and he's fit. It's certainly not ideal, but mentally and everything else, he's in the prime of his career. He's never been more confident. His belief is sky high. If he's physically fine, he's the point of difference. He's the guy that can score goals, can unlock defenses for us, can find a way. And I just don't want to imagine if he's not there.
What other players, maybe in the senior age bracket, are perhaps less known, but do you think could play well?
Yeah, the funny thing is there's not many senior players. Like, it's such a young team. I'm struggling to pick out senior players, but we've got a very experienced defender, Michael Boxall, who's been in the MLS for years. He's now 37 and he's still as good as ever, as fast as ever. He'll be crucial. But if I think about guys that are going to be vital in the pressure situation that's coming, I think about someone like Liberato Kakachi. He's the first New Zealander to play in Serie A, 80 games for Empoli. Now he's at Wrexham. He's had injuries too, like Chris Wood, but he's a big match performer on the left wing back or left full back. He'll be excellent. Another guy, Marko Stamenic. He's about 24. He's playing for Swansea, but he's already got league titles in Serbia, in Denmark, and in one other country which slips my mind. So he's an amazing career. He's a super composed midfielder on the ball. So if you look at Stamenic and Kakachi, you see a couple of guys that are so important to this team.
So perhaps the more fun question would be, who are the young guys to look out for? Like who are you projecting into the future? Like these are going to be kind of key pieces in this New Zealand national team.
Yeah, like there's definitely a couple of guys who you think, wow, if everything goes right, they could be breakouts. They could be guys that, you know how at every World Cup there's someone who comes along that no one quite expects and suddenly making headlines and then gets a big transfer. We do have a couple of those guys. One of them, a winger called Jesse Randall, who's currently playing for Auckland FC in the A-League here, but his form has turned heads so much that he's just got to move to Dundee United. And he's raw, but he's got electric pace. I think he's got the most goal involvements in terms of goals and assists of anyone in the A-League this season. So if he can handle the occasion, he's a guy that can really, really do something. The other one I really like, because let's face it, New Zealand is going to be soaking up a lot of pressure. So I think their defenders are going to be noticed. We've got a player called Finn Surman. He's only 22 years old at Portland Timbers. He's already captained Portland Timbers as a guy who just came from Wellington, an import. He's already been a captain. That's how much he's impressed him. And Finn's just got this innate ability to always be in the right place to the defender, to get blocks in, to get the tackle in, he's just amazing in that sense. So in a team that's going to be under a lot of pressure, I think Finn Surman is a guy that could be noticed, and suddenly he ends up in Europe after this World Cup.
Cool. So I've only got a few more questions left. What is New Zealand's floor and what is their ceiling?
Yeah, well, that's the hardest question you've posed so far. And it's just because, as I said at the start, we've played so many friendlies, and I don't know what you think of friendlies, but I hate the term, and they can be really good. And New Zealand's played some big teams, like they played Colombia in the States, which, as you know, is like playing Colombia in Bogota, and they pushed them. They 1-0 up and then 1-1 with a few minutes to go. They drew in Oslo against Norway 1-1. They drew with the Republic of Ireland. They beat Cote d'Ivoire. So they've had some good results, but you never know until it's a competitive match, and it's something that these players, even though they've played big matches for their club, this is another level. So to get to your point, I think they could be really good and could get as high as second in the group and really turn heads. The realistic aim is to be third in the group, be one of those best third place teams, and get, say, I think 4 points will be enough to go through. That would be amazing. And the fear, of course, is that they stumble in the first match and then end up fourth in the group. They're a team on the rise, and maybe they won't peak until 2030. But I feel like this is a moment because they've got Chris Wood. They've got Chris Wood, our greatest goal scorer, plus all these young guys. So let's take advantage of having a guy that we've only had one player comparable to Chris Wood, which is Winton Rufus. So to have a goal scorer like him that other countries would love to have, I feel like you got to make the most of it.
So there's Belgium, there's Egypt, and there's Iran. So is there any pressure to get out of this group? Or what is the pressure to be successful? And how is success defined?
Yeah, that's a good thing to think about. I think there's two things that most people want and expect at this World Cup, because it's been a journey for New Zealand. 1982, the achievement was qualifying. Before we even got there, people said back here, we've won our World Cup by just getting there. And then we went to 82 and we had to play against Scotland, the best Scotland team probably, USSR, and then we played Brazil. You know that Brazil, right? That Brazil was Socrates, Falcao, Zico, Junior, and lost 4-0, but acquitted themselves well. So, and then 2010, the team went, we still like to talk about this, the team went undefeated, didn't lose a game, 3 draws, but we're still so proud of that. So the two steps now I see is winning a game, for the first time at a World Cup, which there's plenty of nations who haven't done that, but that would be the first thing. And the second thing, getting out of a group, because as you mentioned, the group, I feel like it's quite a generous group. Like it could have been better, but it could have been a lot worse. You could have had a South American team. You could have had 2 European teams. You could have friggin' Norway. So it's quite an accessible group. New Zealand will be underdogs in all 3 matches. I've got no doubt about that. But there's an expectation that they should get to the next round. If they don't, the campaign will be seen as a bit of a disappointment. But the first match seems crucial to most of us back here. That match against, everyone hopes and assumes it's Iran. That's the match that definitely got to avoid defeat, get a point at least, but probably got to take 3 because Egypt are pretty daunting with some of the attacking talent they've got. And you don't want to go to Belgium in the last round and the last game of the group and be hoping to get something. You sort of want to be, already through and hoping that Belgium's a bonus because we know how good Belgium can be, eh?
Well, it could be that, Belgium have beat Egypt. They've beaten Iran. They have 6 points. They rest their starters.
I like you talking. I like you talking, Daniel. I like it.
It could be. It could be that.
Yeah, no.
All right. So, who's your pick to win the World Cup? I will take New Zealand off the table for you.
You know what? I'd love to see a new winner. I really would love to see a new winner. We always talk about that. Everyone got excited with Croatia in 2018. So I'd love to see a team like Portugal really, really fulfill that amazing potential they have. And then I think of England. I'd count them as a new winner, right? Because it's been so long. So I think Portugal or England would be wonderful as new winners. But if I was putting money on it, I'd look at a team like Spain or France or Brazil or Argentina. The South American team's going to be good because the conditions are going to suit them. But if you're asking for a prediction right now, I would say Spain.
Cool. My last question. Is there anything I haven't asked about New Zealand football culture that you find particularly interesting, novel, that you think people should know or might want to know?
Well, one thing that always comes up is 2 things, actually. One is the team's called the All Whites, and that tends to fascinate people, and some people don't like that. So if I can just clarify that the team is called the All Whites for a very simple reason, that we're quite obsessed with teams around colours in New Zealand, all because of the All Blacks. So the All Blacks they were called the All Blacks from 1905 because they wore all black. And since then, most other national teams have adopted some form of that. So the cricket team is called the Black Caps because they wear a cap. The basketball team is called the Tall Blacks because they're tall. You'll love all these. The hockey team is called, you probably guessed, the hockey team is called the Black Sticks. So the All Whites is just because they wear white, and it's just a convention. So just to clear that up, because it does create some discussion sometimes, that name. And the other thing is that I often get asked is, will the team do the haka? With the war dance was made so famous by the All Blacks. So I can confirm the team won't do the haka. They have done it before, here and there over the years, in the 60s, 70s occasionally when they had a win, but they haven't done it for decades, and they're actually not allowed to, of course. FIFA won't let teams do any sort of performance before a match. But also, if New Zealand do qualify, I wouldn't be surprised if they pulled out some kind of haka. As you just said, they've just drawn with Belgium. They're through the second round. Players on the field, shirts off. Especially there are some Māori players in the team, and they might be leading the haka with their supporters. So, yeah, that would be wonderful to see. And then, yeah, I think New Zealand's a emerging football nation. The other thing I would say, mate, is just that I feel like the team can punch above its weight, because I think a lot of people looking at the World Cup, looking at the draw, listening to this podcast, will look at New Zealand and think, world number 85, what are they doing there, But that ranking, I don't know what you think about rankings, but that ranking is a bit unfair, because you only really get rankings from playing competitive games. When you play friendlies, you don't get much. So there's all these teams in CONCACAF or whatever that sort of accumulate points. and New Zealand never play. So the rankings, I'd put them more at about, I don't know, 60, 55 on a good day. I don't know. So, but they've got to prove that now, right? Because I'm sure a lot of people, I'm sure you're thinking, oh, I mean, you tell me, but you're probably thinking, does New Zealand actually deserve to be there? They've only beaten they've only beaten Fiji and New Caledonia. So that's the biggest test for this group, that they've got to prove not just to this country, but to the world that they belong at this big, that FIFA's biggest showpiece.
Well, at least they will get the 3 games and we'll get to see. So, Michael, I thank you for taking the time to do this. I really appreciate it. Where can people follow you if you want to be followed?
Oh, yeah, I'm at Mike Burgess 99 on. Do we still call it Twitter? Let's call it Twitter. Yeah.
Sure. Links will be in the description. Michael, thank you for taking the time. I appreciate it, man.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. And I really admire your project of trying to speak to all 48, speak about all 48 teams. That's one hell of a mission.
We're trying our best. Peace, peace, peace.